and hopefully Kenya. You may have wondered what the building was on the picture on our flyer for the event. It is the African Union building in Addis Ababa. The AU, African Union, has a Women, Peace and Security remit, and the department is headed by Benita Diop, who is the African Union's Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, whom you might have heard speak at the WPS debate in the Security Council a couple of weeks ago. Africa is very important to peacekeeping, not just UN peacekeeping. We will hear shortly how African countries are providing peacekeepers in conflict-affected countries, such as Botswana in Mozambique. One of the African Union's campaigns is Silence the Guns, Agenda 2063. This is a very long way off, but there are milestones and definite steps need to be made towards them. Peacekeeping is an important part of this. Amongst the top 50 countries providing UN peacekeepers, both troop and police peacekeepers in Africa are, and I'll name the countries, Rwanda, Egypt, Ghana, Senegal, Morocco, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Chad, South Africa, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Zambia, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, Malawi, Burundi, Guinea, Uganda, Tunisia, Benin, Kenya, and Nigeria. Africa provides nearly half of the countries providing UN peacekeepers. And we'll hear from our speakers how women are a central part of plans for peacekeeping operations. I will now pass over to Barbara, my colleague, to introduce the speakers and moderate the subsequent discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. Hello and welcome from me too. And it's so great to have so many of you join us for this event. Just to let you know, we are live streaming it. So if anybody has been unable to join us today, they will be able to catch it later. And just to say, I'm Barbara Cleary and I'm Chair of Security Women, and I'm going to moderate the event for today, as Juliet said. We did send out a little agenda, but just to recap on that, we've got a panel of distinguished speakers who are privileged to have with us, and I will introduce them in a moment. But just to say that the speakers will first of all make a short presentation, and then we'll have a panel discussion, and I will be putting a number of questions to the speakers. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to join us and participate in the panel discussion. And to do that, we ask you either to put your questions in the chat or to raise your hand using the raise hand function, which you'll probably find in different, the screen I'm looking at, the raise hand function is in the reactions bit at the bottom of the screen. On your screens, it may be somewhere else, but we will be using the raise hand function, and we'll do our very best to make sure we see all the hands. In order that we get as many questions in as possible, can I ask you all if we keep our questions short and concise, and then we'll be able to reach out to more people. So let me introduce the speakers. Now, I'm thinking we're still waiting on Brigadier Joy Setonay, or are you with us, Brigadier Setonay? No. Well, she hopefully will be joining us very soon, and is the director of the International Peace Support Training Centre and an education officer in the Kenya Defence Forces. Brigadier Setonay has extensive experience in training methodology and has been instrumental developing gender mainstreaming processes, undertaking gender needs assessments, and gender policy development. She has worked in Rwanda and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where she was a military observer. And our next speaker will be Ms. Boahisi Vapi, who is the Senior Defence and International Relations Officer in Botswana's Ministry of Defence and Security. Her areas of expertise include human rights, defence cooperation, bilateral and multilateral cooperation, anti-human trafficking refugee management programs, and implementing conventions and agreements. She is passionate about people being at the center of development and security, and people, as we know, should be at the center of everything. And finally, we have Dr. Fifi Edu-Aful, who is a senior research fellow and the deputy program head of the Peace Support Operations Program at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. He also serves as a facility member on the MA program in Defense and International Politics at Ghana Armed Forces and Command and Staff College. Of specific relevance, he's currently lead researcher on the implementation of the ELSI initiative, support to the Ghana Armed Forces on enhancing capabilities to address barriers to women's participation in peacekeeping and operations, which we're going to hear more about. So welcome to our panel, and let's get started. And I'm going to ask, on the basis that I think Brigadier Setene is still not with us. Florina, do we know if... Okay,
No,
on that basis, sorry, Florina?
No, I think it's not here.
Not as yet.
I don't think it's
okay.
here. No.
Well, okay. On that basis, can I ask Ms. Mohahisi Mapi if you would start us off in terms of your presentation, please?
I can share the presentation.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and if you could get us started, that would be brilliant. And I'll give you a gentle reminder when you get to 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm not sure if is Fifi Adul, is she in here? Aful. She's the one
Dr.
that asked
Fifi,
for a link.
Dr. Fifi, yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
Yes.
great. Thank you. Sorry. I thought it was the brigadier who was. Okay.
It's the brigadier that we're waiting on, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Mohahisi Mapi, and I'm a Senior Defense and International Relations Officer in the Ministry of Defense and Security here in Botswana. Next slide, please. I have been working in this ministry since 2009, so I've got a vast experience in the defense and security sector, being, at junior level and since the ministry was started. So I've been through everything that we've been through since its inception. As was already said, I'm passionate about the inclusion of women in leadership and in the defense and security sector. And the backbone of my presentation is that the meritocracy is the cornerstone of appointments in leadership positions in Botswana. So what we've had about 3 women that have led this ministry, have been at the helm and like CEO level of the ministries, and they've all been appointed based on merit. And throughout the security sector, they've been, whether it's in the Botswana Police Service or in the Botswana Prison Service, they've been women in leadership positions that have gotten there by merit. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little contextual and historical background about Botswana, while we are not named in the countries that have, women participating in peacekeeping and peace support operations at a large scale, we have always been a society that believes in the abilities of women to lead. Women have always been at liberty to speak during our consultation forums. That it's called the Khotla systems. That's where, each and every person in this country has an opportunity to air their views about governance. And from a historical point of view, women have always been able to raise their hands and lend their voices to the governance process. This women in leadership thing is in our DNA, as it is embedded in our national anthem, which explicitly singles out the need for women to stand up and work together to serve our country. We have slogans that are anchors of our society, such as Mosadi Tharia Setjhaba, which loosely translates to "Women, you are the pillar of the nation." It comes as no surprise that we have had and continue to have significant number of women in leadership positions across government, whether it's at the Attorney General level, whether it's the Speaker of Parliament. In different forms of government, we've had women in leadership positions. Next slide, please. I've already mentioned the permanent secretaries. In the security sector, women do play an important role in the discourse and management of security. As I've mentioned, the Botswana Police Service, they've got high-ranking women. In the Botswana Prison Service, the current commissioner is a woman. She's the first woman to be a commissioner of the prison service. And one of her deputies is also a woman. And in the Botswana Defense Force, the highest ranking officer is a major. It's important to note that we only started having women allowed in our defense forces in 2008. So it's a fairly new development in our defense regime. In terms of peacekeeping or peace support operations, we've only recently restarted as a government or as a country participating. We are in Mozambique, in the SADC mission in Mozambique, and we are also in the DRC, the MONUSCO mission. At both, there are women who have been deployed. As a region, I do believe we still have a long way to go for the meaningful inclusion of women, and the momentum for women's leadership within the defense and security sector still needs to be enhanced. In terms of where I think the gaps are, I think what we have is capacity building challenges. As a ministry, we still have very few officers, including myself, that actually work in the defense and security sector. A lot of the ministries comprised of corporate services, what I would call support functions, and in other institutions or departments that are under us, there is still room for women to be capacitated to understand and operate within the defense sector. There is a need for increased participation in training, which I think is a critical component that has been lagging behind. And one of the reasons why we haven't been participating at the scale of our neighbors and our other people in the region. And as a people, I think we need to understand diversity and inclusivity is key. If we cannot adequately train and resource and deploy, if we don't understand the differential consequences for women and girls in conflict situations. Now, I was asked to do a little slide on human trafficking and the progress we're making from a security perspective in human trafficking. And the next slide, please, sorry. And what we have done from the beginning when we developed our legislation, we've been very aggressive with our training program so that people can understand, can start to identify, can be able to deal with the security threat. We've had training of frontline officers. This is immigration, social workers, people at the air hostesses, people who work in the airport. We've done rigorous training for all those components. We've had colloquia for judges and magistrates, I think 3 of them. We have a national action plan that we're currently implementing. It comes to an end this year. I think there'll be a new one next year. But as a country, we are mainly a transit country, but we remain vigilant to prevent human trafficking, even though we are not really a destination for those victims. We have had lots of collaboration and support from development partners, and we continue to submit annual reports to the United States government on what we're doing and how we're faring in human trafficking. In conclusion, to conclude, and I hope I haven't been too fast and you've been able to follow, but what I feel is necessary for us to see the change we want to see in terms of women in leadership and women taking up space in the security and defense sector is capacity building for this country in particular. We also need deliberate action and programming. There's a lot of by the way, things just happen on a by the way basis, not because of any deliberate or intentional action and programming to ensure that women are trained in peacekeeping, women are trained in conflict prevention and resolution, and therefore we can support these endeavors in different areas within the defense and security sector. I think there's also a need to understand from a leadership point of view why inclusivity is important, because then you will be able to adequately resource and train women to be included in the space. I think that we cannot understand that we cannot plan effectively if we do not do any research. We also have a research element that is lacking, or where I think there's still room for improvement in a gender sensitive manner, so that we are able to plan properly, knowing where our gaps are, where our challenges are, and where our successes have been in terms of the women that have gone ahead to be deployed and what they have faced, and where we still feel we can do more. I think it's important that it becomes a priority, because currently I would not say it's something that is top of mind, but I think it's key to make it a priority for to see some traction in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. And there were three things I picked up there which were really important in terms of leadership and women being in leadership and at the decision-making tables, and the importance of increased participation of women in the actual delivery of the training. And the last one, the fact that change doesn't happen by chance. It has to be delivered, and it has to be intended. And that is so important in terms of moving things forward. So thank you for that presentation. And we'll come back to you in the panel discussion in a little while. And I'm now going to move on, and I'm going to
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. And I'm now going to ask, is Brigadier Setene with us yet?
No, I don't think so, actually, Barbara.
Okay, in that case, can we move on to Dr. Fifi Edua-Athol? Can I ask you to present to us in terms of what you have to share with us today?
Okay. Good afternoon to the fellow panelists, to the chair, and then also to all the participants that have joined us this afternoon to discuss this very pertinent topic around women, peace and security, where the change is and where we could make the change happen. Today, as part of my presentation, I'll be looking at the progress that have been made since the year 2000, after the publication of the momentous Women, Peace and Security Resolution 1325. But to perhaps start out, by giving a brief introduction about the Ghana Armed Forces, because that's going to be my focus for the presentation, and the progress that the Ghana Armed Forces has made over the years in terms of its deployment of women into international peace and security operations. You know, when it comes to peacekeeping and peace support operations, Ghana has been participating in national peacekeeping since the 1960s. And if you look at the top 10 countries, Ghana remained a heavy player in the top 10 countries, as was clearly stated by Dr. Juliet in her earlier presentation. And you find out that Ghana always finds itself in the top 10 top contributing countries when it comes to international peacekeeping operations. And we find ourselves being deployed to countries in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, and then in other parts of the world. So Ghana has been a major player when it comes to international peacekeeping operations. And when it comes to deployment of international Ghana Armed Forces into these operations, you realize that both men and women find space in the deployment into international peacekeeping operations. So that perhaps explains why when it comes to our discussion or understanding of men and women's role within the Ghana Armed Forces, and when it comes to roles that they perform within peacekeeping operations, is a very pertinent subject that warrants everybody's attention. So, like I said, there's been increased participation of women within the Ghana Armed Forces in international peacekeeping operations. And so, in the year 2020, Ghana subjected itself to what we call the Measuring Opportunities for Women's Participation in Peacekeeping Operations. That is a Canadian-funded initiative, which is the ELSI initiative, to see where the barriers are when it comes to women's deployment in peacekeeping operations. we know how our militaries are actually formed. This is mainly a male-dominated institutions that have a lopsided representation of both men and women within the force. And so for us, this was a very good tool for us to be able to understand what the barriers are and why we are not able to deploy more and more women into international peacekeeping operations. But I must say that Ghana is not doing bad at all, because if you look at the UN's own bar in terms of percentage for women's participation in peacekeeping operations, Ghana is slightly exceeding that with a deployment of over 20% of women soldiers as military observers, and has also achieved the UN target of deploying 15% of women soldiers among formed police troops. So, I mean, these are figures that already exist, and we see that Ghana is not doing bad at all, but there's still room for improvement. So in the work that we did with respect to the emerging opportunities for women to role in peace operations, we identified 10 areas or 10 barriers that we wanted to actually understand why women do not get a space when it comes to issues of deployment. And these barriers were along the eligibility pool. The second one was around the deployment criteria. The third one was around the deployment and selection into these peacekeeping operations. Then we also wanted to understand the household constraints that prevent women from being deployed into international peacekeeping operations. And then we also looked at the peacekeeping operations infrastructure, whether it is enough to support the needs of both men and also support the needs of women, because this will actually tell in terms of how many women we are able to deploy into these international peacekeeping operations. Then we also looked at, in strong terms, peacekeeping operation experiences, because some of these experiences actually remain a barrier to women deploying into some of these peacekeeping environments.
Excuse me. I'm sorry if I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was managing your slides, so I don't know if you are on your own presentation, or could you let me know when I change
you
the
can
slides?
just keep on showing. I will just talk to the
perfect.
slides.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Then we also looked at the seventh one was look at career value, and here we look at how women are deployed and they have advanced role in peacekeeping environments. The eighth one, we look at leadership and how women are able to progress within the mission environments to see how well women are doing. The eighth one was to look at the gender roles within the peacekeeping operations. Then lastly, we looked at also the social exclusion when it comes to women's participation in peacekeeping operations. And when it comes to issues of leadership, we have a lot of women that have assumed senior leadership positions within international peacekeeping operations. We had Brigadier General Ejani, who was the Deputy Force Commander with MINUSO. We've had Brigadier General Chung, that was with UNOSI, and we have several other women playing critical leadership roles in most of these peacekeeping operations. But for us, we really needed to understand what the barriers were and the things that prevented more women for us to be able to move beyond the 20% to maybe get into a 30% or a 40%, and realize that three critical barriers were of importance to us when it comes to women's participation in peacekeeping operations. The first one had to do with the eligibility pool. The second one has to do with the gender roles. Then the third one has to do with social exclusion. So the eligibility pool was just for us to understand why why are there enough women in the Ghana Armed Forces. The reality is that you cannot deploy what you do not have. If you're able to recruit more, then you'll be able to deploy more international peacekeeping operations. So for us, recruitment was an important point for us to be able to look at how we could increase the numbers of women's deployments into peacekeeping operations. And so you needed to find out in terms of what were the barriers, why were women not breaking the ranks to be recruited into the Ghana Armed Forces, and all of those issues to look at. So the eligibility pool was quite important. And then when they are recruited into the Ghana Armed Forces, do they find space in all the different units within the armed forces? In the combat unit, do they find space in units like the high-ranking units that you might want to think about? The commanders' corps, do they find space in that? So we will try to find out that it's not just a matter of getting to the armed forces, but we also find leverage in being able to assess what in Ghana we call the teeth arms, like the armor division, like the artillery, like the combat roles, so that they will be able to do all the necessary courses that will put them into leadership positions. There we found a challenge with it in terms of the work that we did. Then also there was the issue around the gender roles. And this has some sort of traditional undertone. So obviously when women are recruited into the armed forces, they are given what they call the softer roles. So you not find them in the combat role. And the reality is that when you don't get space in the combat roles, then you do not get the space to become a leader, or you do not get the space to rise within the force to be able to assume a position that we would classify as a leadership position. And these gender roles actually transcend into some of the softer roles that we have had in the Ghana Armed Forces. So you find that women were in the clerical duties, they were in the secretarial duties, they were in the cooks, and all of those different minor roles that women rather than being on the combat position. So, but there were a lot of challenges that we needed to perhaps also look at that. Then we also needed to look at social exclusion, looking at the Ghana Armed Forces itself as a male-dominated institution, the culture of that institution and how that culture inhibits or prevents women from gaining access to some very important positions within the Ghana Armed Forces, and to be able to be in certain units that can help them to rise in those units. So we try to engage all of these different barriers that we thought were inhibitions to women's participation in international peacekeeping. But for me, those were the challenges. There are still some good aspects of it. You found how, when it comes to training, for instance, you have both men and women training together, and at least that also opens the space for them. You also found out that when it comes to issues of deployment, men and women have a fair and equal chance of being deployed onto peacekeeping operations. The challenge is, are they allowed to be deployed into specific career positions? I remember very well that in the course of the research, we had gone to some part of the country, and some women complained, a particular woman complained about how she felt she was a career person. Her specialty was signals. And then they were going to a mission in Lebanon, and they were looking for a cook. And they looked around, they didn't find a cook. They said, you will be the cook, and then you join. But this is a woman that is a specialist in signals. She felt underutilized in the mission, and she couldn't express herself in that mission. So those are some of the challenges that perhaps we need to be able to deal with, and understanding some of the institutional cultures and the barriers that prevent women's own advancement within the Ghana Armed Forces. So there are issues to do with policy. We need to look at the policies that exist. There are so many policies that we need to read through. Like I said, this is an institution that is a male-dominated institution. It's an institution that has a very masculine culture, and so they do not want to create a space for women to be able to excel. So we need to look at the policy. We also need to look at the practice. To what extent are we able to provide the needed resources and support to women to be able to rise through the ranks? Then also we need to look at the training and the organizational culture. We need to be able to deal with that strongly. Once you're able to deal with all of these four so different areas, then we could see our numbers rising beyond the 20% as we have it now. And there's still more room for improvement. I want to end here and then wait for the interactions that we'll have afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fifi Adua-Afo. That was very, very wide-ranging and informative. And for me, it was really important to hear you talk about the Malwit assessment study in terms of the importance of understanding the barriers, the challenges that women are facing, and the contrast between the civil roles and the combat roles, and that women should be able to have the opportunity, to choose where they would like to work. And that's true for everywhere in society. And also the importance of men and women training together. I really do believe that, you know, there needs to be spaces for men, there needs to be spaces for women, but I do feel that the training is really important that we do that together. So that was a really important point. And also the importance of policy. And, you know, policy underpins and provides the framework within which we work. But getting those policies right is important, as indeed is the cultural change. Perhaps the hardest thing for us to be able to change in terms of making the difference. And we'll probably get around to hearing a bit more about that as we go on with the panel discussion. So thank you again, Dr. Fifi Aduafo. Can I just ask, is Brigadier Setene with us? Or shall we move on to our panel discussion? Yes, Florina?
No, I cannot see it in the chat.
No?
So I don't think so.
Right, there's no message.
No.
Okay, right. In that case, then our panel, we have Miss Mappy, sorry, and Dr. Edward Apple, and I'm sure between us we will have a very interesting and fruitful panel discussion. So if I can come to you, Miss Mappy, first, and maybe can I ask you to talk a little bit about how have women working at a senior level in the judicial and the law enforcement services in Botswana made a difference? So if we can just focus in on law and enforcement to get us started, and women's involvement and what difference that has made and what more can be done.
Thank you very much for that question. You know, as I've said, we've had a woman attorney general. We have many women on the bench in terms of our judiciary, and I believe that has made a good difference and an impact in the way that we address issues in a gender-sensitive manner. It has brought greater awareness to women's issues, but I think as with everything that I've been saying, there's a lot that still needs and can be done. There's room for more space, room for more programming, and room for more issues to be handled in a way that is from a gender-sensitive lens. So I do think, you know, the waves are being made, but I think there is still room for improvement, room for impact, and a bit of room for diversity of views in that way.
Could you say a little bit more about what the issues are that are preventing the challenges that we need to address in order to be able to make, you know, build on the difference that we're making now?
You know, I think it's not for a lack of opportunity, because as I've said, you know, everything is based on merit. It's not for a lack of opportunity. There are many women who are lawyers. There are many women who are law enforcement officers. I don't think it's from a lack of opportunity. I just think it's taking us a little bit longer to get to that point. So I think, you know, there is, you know, they're highly skilled, highly educated. They have the training, they have the passion, they have the educational background, whatever it is, but it's just maybe taking a little longer for it to be for the impact to be felt by the community, is, if I can put it that way. So
okay,
I may be sitting here as the first female attorney general, but you know, it's not translating to the next sort of woman down there. But even though they are there, and they continue to be more women who are being churned by the education wheel, the work career, all of that. I think it's just taking us a bit long.
Okay, right. So that's so it's a bit more of a push. The door needs to be pushed open a little bit further.
Exactly.
Okay, so can I come to Dr. Edward Apple, and can I ask you a little bit about the participation of men and boys. And we know that gender equality is not a woman's issue. Men and boys must be engaged to challenge the beliefs and practices that drive the inequality between men and women. So drawing on all your experience, can you tell us what you have learned and observed, and what are the realities and challenges in terms of the engagement of men and boys in addressing equality?
I guess at the heart of that is a whole discussion around what gender is and how we understand gender within our own context. I think being a gender advocate and a practitioner in the field for over a decade, I've come to appreciate that in most instances, when we talk about gender issues, the focus is on women. Men and boys are often not part of the discussion in that. And we've seen how that has translated into a number of programs that we've had all over. I mean, about 3-4 years ago, as part of work to look at sexual violence against men and boys in conflict, and the Secretary General's office asked us to do some work. And we're in Congo having interactions with men and boys that have gone through sexual and gender-based violence. And if you have an interaction with almost the widespread of society, and you get a feeling that when we talk about even sexual and gender-based violence, the issue is that men and boys are not the focus. The focus are women and girls. But we've seen in the UN Secretary General's own reports how there are increasing number of abuses against men and boys. And this translates into even the response that we give in terms of dealing with this phenomenon in conflict environment. I think we need to move beyond the discussion where the focus of gender is only looked at as a woman's issue. It goes beyond women's issue. The theoretical definition of gender talks about the relationship between men and boys, right? A relationship between men and boys, women and girls. And so we really need to focus on roping both men and women into this discourse around gender, and also around issues of inclusion or inclusivity. And perhaps if you're able to do that very well, then we'll have this integration where there's diversity in all of our discussion and discourse. And because we are not able to do that very well, that is why in most of our countries on the continent, the moment you mention gender issues, the focus, I mean, most men switch off because they think it's women's issues and it's women's issues they are dealing with. And for me, that also doesn't help us in getting the needed support and our opportunity to be able to open the space for women to be able to break all of the different barriers that we've put in their place. So yes, there's already a challenge when it comes to dealing with issues of men and boys in this whole discourse around inclusion in the debate. But we need to make a conscious effort to rope the men and boys in so that it doesn't become another barrier for us, maybe 5-10 years down the line, to come around the table and say, no, we need to bring the men on the table and we need to bring the women on, we need to bring the boys on the table. So I feel there are real challenges out there, but we really need to be able to create the space where we are able to bring them all into the discussion.
And do you, but based on that, do you think, and I can only speak for my own experience, but in terms of your experience, do you feel that there's a need that more can be done in the education system in terms of working with young boys? And I'm thinking as young as what I would call infant primary school.
Oh yes, I mean, I think that is very possible, and I think we need to start from the very early age. When I'm not too old, but when we were growing up, the definition of gender is different from what we are how we are defining gender now. And I don't even know the curriculum that we are using in our schools when it comes to understanding issues of gender and how all of the different sexes, male, females, need to be considered, and even to a very large extent, people that profess other sexuality need to be sort of. I mean, the space needs to be widened for us to include the needs of all of these. So I think we need to start from the educational system, from our schools, and be able to build the needed support to be able to instill in the young ones the belief systems around respect for diversity. Respect for people that have different genders, respect for people that have different sexuality, and all of those. But I think that is where we need to start from. The education is very, very important, especially for my continent, where we look at gender in a very, very traditional sense. Just the binary, and it doesn't go beyond the binary. These are the challenges we have to deal with. And so you need to be able to open that space for that kind of discussions to be had.
Yes, no, it's a difficult issue. It's not easy. But then we need to be creative in finding the ways of being able to engage men and boys. And I remember hearing some while back now about a program, I think it was in India, where a local organization had brought all the local young men into this program. And this program was about helping them to understand how men and women can live together differently, and that they could be engaged more in doing some of the things that the women are doing now. And it took this program a while to overcome the challenges. But she was amazed when she said, one mother came back to me and she said, "You have made a difference. My son is now doing all the chores around the house." And she doesn't even have to ask him, he's just doing them. So, it's possible wherever we live in the world. It is possible. It's just understanding and putting it across in the right way in terms of how it appeals to people. Okay, thank you, Dr. Edward Affle. And can I come back to you, Ms. Mappy, please, and ask you about Botswana, which has taken steps to allow women into the armed forces. I think it's been a few years now, and there have been reports of sexual and gender-based violence being a significant problem, and that's true around the world, not just in Botswana. And can you tell us about Botswana's approach to addressing the problem and creating an enabling environment for those women who choose to work in the military? How do we do it? And have you found any solutions yet?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. I've thought long and hard about it because, the difficulty is that, I'm here on a personal capacity and not representing an institution. So I cannot come here with actual facts based on what has transpired, any reports, and how those issues were dealt with. But what I can confidently say is that the legal framework exists for reporting and punishing such kind of crimes against women within the military system, which for me is a positive thing, that you have recourse or legal recourse should something you be a victim of such a violation during the course of your duty. And I think that a key thing is to create an enabling environment for people to report, for women to feel comfortable enough to come and say, listen, 1, 2, 3 has happened to me by such and such a senior, because as I've said, the highest ranking is a major, so there aren't that many senior or level officers. But it's important for us to create an enabling environment or conducive environment for reporting. And I know that work is being done to get to that place. And I know that work is continuously being done to ensure that some of these things should not be challenges that the military is constantly dealing with. So far, I have not had any firsthand experience with something like that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm definitely not saying it has not happened. I cannot vouch or say anything, comment on the factual situation on the ground. But I do know that when you have legal recourse, when you have an enabling environment, some of these challenges would probably not, especially within the military, not like outside, but even then, there are systems in place to have proper reporting and have resolution to such kind of violations.
Yes, no, I agree with you there in terms of it. There has to be an environment where people feel they can come forward and report. Can I just ask you one other thing in terms of our own experience here in the UK? And I'm thinking here in terms of kind of domestic violence and assault and so on. We have a real problem for people being able to get justice through the system, and there's a backlog. And some people have got to the point now where they feel it's not even worth reporting. Yeah. Are people able, where they do report, are they able to work through the system easily and get justice?
You know, we've recently, there's been, you know, a lot of work done in terms of creating a situation where women can, how can I put it, like safe reporting channels within the police station for women and children. That's what we've done currently with our certain police station, no, all police stations, but there's some that are just for children where we're piloting that sort of child-friendly police stations, and for women as well, where there's, you know, you can be in a specific room with no one else around and be able to report gender-based violence. We've also, as recently as 2020 December, if I'm not mistaken, because of the whole COVID-19 situation where things got really bad, and the Chief Justice created a special court for gender-based violence so that we can sort of move these cases along, and then see that, you know, people are not living in a protracted legal situation for too long, because these are matters of people, you know, people against people crimes, if I can put it that way.
Yes.
And the disappointing thing, and this I have the research and the facts of what has transpired. This I do know, because we had to do that for a human rights report that we were doing, is that, you know, a lot of the time people withdraw these cases when they are already at the court. And unfortunately, you know, these are people situations, and people face different situations in their lives that lead them in their livelihoods and whatever challenges they're facing, and it leads them to then say, you know, listen, this is the father of my children, and he's the breadwinner, so if he goes to jail, what happens to, you know, those are the complexities that I'm hearing.
Yes.
People are battling with, you know, finally getting justice or finally getting convictions for these sort of situations. So unfortunately, that's what has happened with the court itself. But I can say that it was created as a specific measure to speed up, to have speedier access to justice.
Yes, no, that's interesting in the sense of creating a special court for children. That's, you know, in terms of...
No, not for children, for women, for gender-based violence, not for children.
Okay, sorry.
For children is the police stations, sorry.
Right, okay, sorry, then I misunderstood. But yes, no, a special court for gender-based violence in terms of being able to, you know, process cases. That's an interesting, you know, idea in terms of being able to move things through that much faster. Can I ask one other thing? In terms of where a woman may be assaulted, raped, or harassed, whatever, within the military, is that heard through the military process court system, or is it heard through the civil courts? Do you know?
I am actually not aware.
No.
If like, say, you know, this sort of case, if it would be handled by our military
Yes.
system. Let me quickly find out.
Okay.
But I do know that for other issues, they are still able to go to the normal courts and not have it handled within. Yes. So definitely they are at liberty to go to the normal courts and have those issues sorted out there. But I'm not sure if the actual military court system
have their own court system, whether it's processed through that system or comes.
Yeah, okay, I highly doubt, though. I highly doubt it, but I can come back to you with an answer shortly.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Mappy. And while you're doing that, I'm going to come back to Dr. Edward Affle, and I'm going to ask if he would tell us a little bit about the way in which Ghana contributes to the African Union peacekeeping agenda and the commitment to promote the participation of women in building a secure and peaceful Africa. Can you perhaps talk a little bit more about, I know you've given us a little bit in terms of your presentation, but perhaps you could build on that and give us a little bit more in terms of how Ghana is contributing and the role of women.
I think Ghana is a member of the African Union and a very instrumental member, if I may call it that way. And Ghana has played several roles from the from the very beginning when we had our first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, creating the space for the push of Africanization, and then also push some African countries towards ending colonialism and the likes on Africa. So Ghana has been a very instrumental member in terms of African Union, the role that African Union has played in recent times. Currently, I am not too sure in terms of Ghana's participation in African Union peacekeeping operations, because I know about ATMIS. That's the current operation that African Union is engaging. I'm not so sure about the numbers in terms of Ghana's representation in there, but we know how Ghana in the past have supported African Union, African Union's own agenda in international peacekeeping operations. And then also through one of the regional blocks of the African Union, that is the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, when they were engaged in peacekeeping operations in Liberia, Sierra Leone, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Mali. Ghana has been very instrumental in deployment of troops to these environments. In most situations, both men and women are sent into this mission. For my presentation, perhaps I didn't touch on it, but we know about the first Brigadier General in the case of Ghana being the Deputy Force Commander with MINESO in Western Sahara. But we know how also two young female pilots played a very critical role in Cote d'Ivoire when it came to airlifting civilians that were being attacked in that conflict. We know how young female pilots were also very instrumental in the work in Mali when they were even sent to the most dangerous places in Kidal and the likes. And we know how Ghanaian women have also played, Ghanaian women with the armed forces has also played varied roles in peacekeeping environment, where they go into the communities, they help to educate the local population, the children, they provide support to humanitarian and some humanitarian assistance to some of the communities in trouble. So Ghana has played varied roles when it comes to UN peacekeeping, and then also to a very large extent African Union peacekeeping operations. Obviously, because of where we are located and our belief in terms of world international peace and security, and that actually is demonstrated in our position when it comes to Ghana's foreign policy. We push a lot with respect to dealing with issues of international peace and security. So yes, we play varied roles when it comes to the armed forces and their role in African Union.
Thank you. And what the point you make about local communities and the women working and educating in the local communities and being there as, being visible to the local communities, that's really important, isn't it, in terms of the local community feeling that they have someone they can talk to.
Yes. Yeah, women, yes. And for me, when you have more and more women being deployed, then you also get the local communities, or in some of the local communities that are not used to seeing women wearing military uniforms, being exposed to the fact that yes, women can also play varied roles in the military, and this can encourage women to join militaries in some of these countries.
Exactly.
Yes, so
because you can only be what you can see, and if you can't see it, then you can't be it. But if you can see, if you can see women in the uniform doing the job, then you can think, well, I could be that too.
Yes, I mean, there's a very good example. There's a very good example about the Bangladeshi and the Indian troops in Liberia, where they were providing security for the head of state. And if we understand that, if we do a trace of the Liberian history, you will see that prior to the war, there were fewer women in their police, fewer women in their military. But post-war, when they saw all of these international actors coming in, they saw women playing varied roles in these. And you've seen the huge numbers of women that have joined the security actors. So yes, there's a blueprint for us to follow in terms of putting women out there and putting them in a very critical positions and allowing them to function effectively and efficiently.
Yes, very well said, very well said. Okay, Ms. Mappy, can I come back to you? My last question.
Sorry, yes, I'm listening, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Coming back, can we just explore a little bit about gender stereotyping and cultural norms, which are, some of the is a primary barrier to achieving gender parity and equality in the security sector and, across the world. And how is the MDS in Botswana addressing these issues? Ministry of Defence, I should say, for those Ministry of Defence. I shouldn't be using acronyms. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Let me go back to the previous question about in the military.
Yes.
There's certain, for example, if it's sexual harassment, because it's explicitly provided for in the Botswana Defence Force Act, it can be tried under court martial.
Okay.
Yes, so there's provision for that, but it also doesn't exclude any of these gender-based violence cases from being heard in a civil court.
As well.
So it would depend on a specific case, because also, within the military, you have to look at the capacity of the lawyers there to deal, or of the system to handle, a rape case or a case of that nature, or whether it would be preferable to have it prosecuted outside of the court martial process.
Yes.
That's the answer to that.
That's very interesting, and thank you for taking the time to go and find that out for us. That is really helpful. That's something that we regularly discuss here, because at the moment in the UK it's dealt with through the army court martial system and not within the courts. And there's an argument that says that certain cases should be tried in civil court.
In civil courts, which is,
yeah.
I mean,
anyway,
I hear
we
both
can
sides.
move on to gender stereotyping.
Yes. That's
if
a
we
very,
could move on
very
to gender
difficult.
stereotyping and what steps is the Ministry of Defence and Security in Botswana taking to address the issue of gender stereotyping and breaking down those barriers that come with it? Yes,
this is a very difficult question for me, I must admit, because a lot of I'm gonna say again, disclaimer, personal opinion.
Okay, that's great.
But
personal opinion is good.
Personal opinion, but we've done a lot of work in terms of our human rights reports and what the recommendations have been regarding harmful cultural practices and gender stereotyping that we need to sort of sort out or eliminate within our DNA. But these things take time, because as it's not everybody that's on board with the kind of changes you're trying to make. And while we are embracing diversity, and we are embracing moving with the times and adapting where we are, but I don't think we have cultural barriers that would block women from taking up space in a leadership position within the defense and security sector. That I don't think exists. I think there's mutual respect. I've experienced, mutual respect from colleagues and from people who are way senior to me, in terms of if you want to speak, you speak, and everybody listens. So I don't think there exist specific barriers that would prevent me from advancing, or from a cultural or gender stereotyping point of view. I think, there's always subliminals. There's always, different nuances, but they have not proven to be actual barriers or how can I put this? Blockades.
Yes, not a brick wall that you can't get.
No, definitely not. I think it's just subliminals where they are, but generally I've experienced, mutual respect. I've seen people respect the women that are in the leadership, because it's not just our permanent secretary. There's many women who are in the executive management team. And whether you are dealing with somebody from the military or from the police force or from the prison force, there's mutual respect. And even from the lower ranks to advancing forward, nobody says, oh no, it's because she's a woman. Let's not. No, I have not seen that happen.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
In the sense of, that's where we should be moving to now.
Absolutely.
And I can say that in my personal experience, I've seen good situations like that, and I've seen others that I think, no, that's not the way to do it. So
we're not going to be led, but no, they really do embrace and listen. And it's been difficult, because I've been here since the first woman permanent secretary, and I've seen, you know, it's a male-dominated area. Let's admit that, right? So I've seen her try and break these certain barriers, certain you don't understand, you won't understand comments, and get to a place where, you know, people reckon with your skill, your talent, and they remember your name. They're forced to reckon with who you are as a woman and as a leader in that space. So it's been a work in progress, but the work has been done. And I think from the first woman, we are now on woman number 3. I can say that I've seen a marked difference in how the other colleagues respond.
That's good. That's good to hear. And I'll probably come back to you perhaps after this event and talk some more about that, because that's something that's, you know, if you've made it work, then I'd like to know a bit more. So,
sure.
Okay, so coming back to you, Dr. Edward Apple, my last question, and it's kind of, we probably touched on it on your presentation and in the other questions, but, you know, we're looking at how do we attract and recruit and retain, and I say retain, more women in the military. And I say retain because there's an issue when we start out and we get kind of to the point where we're kind of in the middling, and we can move up the pipeline to the senior leadership positions, but then, you know, family comes along and that pipeline gets a bit leaky and we can't always continue the journey. So even if we do make the comeback, we tend to be dropped back rather than move on from where we left, if we've gone, you know, left for a bit to have a family. And I'd just like to know a little bit more in terms of the ELSI initiative, and in what ways you think that initiative has helped you in particular in Ghana.
So maybe I'll just have a brief one-line introduction for the Ghana Armed Forces. And to say that the Ghana Armed Forces had a very checkered history. For those who are very familiar with the periods where we had the armed forces being involved in unconstitutional changes of government, to a period where the armed forces has become much more progressive and is being more responsive to recent trends. And referencing the issue with how to recruit, attract, and retain women within the Ghana Armed Forces, I think what the ELSI initiative did was to open up the space for the conversations. So we all know about the barriers that exist. These are barriers that are there, but nobody had actually taken time to speak about these barriers. Nobody actually has taken time to link these barriers to some of the policies that we have. Nobody has actually documented how the institutional structures have put in place some of these barriers. So for me, the ELSI initiative was a very good tool that helped us to expose the challenges that exist within the Ghana Armed Forces in terms of mainstreaming gender into the armed forces. Post the first half of the ELSI initiative, what have we seen? We've seen the rhetoric change from the very strategic level, where you have the Chief of Defense Staff having a senior level gender cadre to explain gender to his senior and topmost officers. And that sort of training has cascaded down to the very lowest units within the Ghana Armed Forces. We've also seen how the Ghana Armed Forces has opened all the branches to females. Example, in the infantry position, in the artillery, in the armor position. And you see that there's no restriction as we are seeing in the past. We've also seen how now females can participate in all trainings. So young officers course, combat team commanders course, practical promotion exercises. So we see all of this progression going on. We've also seen the period where post the ELSI barrier assessment, combat roles are now open to all females as well. And then you see females being now promoted to all ranks. So we've had female generals now. We had we had the first one, and now we have more than one, which is good. We've had females being promoted to colonels. We've had females being promoted to senior warrant officers and then warrant officers. Why, for me, is this important? Because in the past, females were put in certain units that didn't allow them to progress beyond a certain rank. But now, because the space has been opened, we are having more colonels, we are having more brigadier generals, and we are having more generals. And for me, it is good news. We've seen how appointments have also been open to females. So we are having director generals being appointed where women are playing critical points in there. We're having commanding officers being appointed where women are also playing critical roles in it. Post the LC, one of the important things for me that has come out is the opportunities for us to talk about some of these challenges. So it's not just about having the issues and keeping quiet, but to have an open discussion around some of these conversations. As we speak now, we have a team going around almost all of the 9 garrisons in Ghana, sensitizing officers about gender and some of the barriers that prevents them from excelling within the armed forces. And people are being very open in the conversations. They are sharing some of these barriers. They are telling us about their problems. For me, what I see as a plus from the LC initiative, that this will help those who make the decisions to retool some of the policies, those who make the decisions to change their policies. So we've seen how we are creating space for even the uniforms that we buy for our female colleagues. We are creating space for dormitories in the training schools and making it more gendered. And then also removing all of the moribund laws or rules that prevented women from excelling, or for the armed forces itself to attract more women into the force. So we see all of these changes coming up. And for me, I can say it is the LC initiative that has helped us to sort of unravel all of these and be able to document them.
Barbara, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, my mistake. I muted myself then because there was a bit of background noise and I didn't want it to interfere. So yes, it was, it's once the conversation started, you can't put it back in its box again. So the conversation keeps going. And if that's what the initiative, that's the impact the LC initiative has had, then that's good. Okay, I'm going to move on now to the floor. I've looked in the chat box and I see that I think we've got one question in the chat box. Hands up or in the chat, please. Who has a question for the panel? Right, I can see one hand up here. Leslie, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you to our speakers. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear what's working where, because we don't often get this collective sharing, so thank you. My question actually is relating to war crimes, because we're talking about the peacekeeping operations. And I would be very interested to hear from Dr. Excuse me if I pronounce right, Dr. Edu Aful and Morgisi Mapi. Within their country, within your countries and in Africa in general, is there any improvement on accumulating evidence and bringing the leaders, military and political leaders, to court, to justice, who are responsible for people committing war crimes such as conflict-related sexual violence, rather than getting away with just voting themselves impunity? And I'd be very interested, because of Maputo Protocol and things like that, how this is progressing, because it's something that we're all also looking at in all our countries at the moment, the difficulty of actually getting people into court and getting justice. Thank you.
So who would like to jump in first there?
Maybe I'll come in and then my co-panelists can come in later.
Thank you, Dr. Edu.
Issues around conflict-related sexual violence for me is a major issue on our continent, and I remember very well about prior to COVID, when the Kofi Annan Center, on behalf of the United Nations Office on conflict-related sexual violence, had to go around some of these peacekeeping environments to sort of interface with this issue around conflict-related sexual violence and how it impacts on both men and boys. From the Ghanaian, I can speak on the Ghanaian part. So for Ghana, there's a zero tolerance when it comes to issues of officers' involvement in conflict-related sexual violence. And we've seen how the legal framework has been very punitive when it comes to dealing with issues of sexual and gender-based violence. I remember, and this is not for the military, for the police, when they were accused for being engaged in some sort of more practices, I think was in Sudan. They were actually quickly repatriated, and the legal framework actually kicked in terms of their prosecution and the likes. I'm yet to find out where it ended in there. But for me, there's a lot that we can do institutionally to build the bridges by training them, resourcing them to be able to identify these crimes and to be able to collect the needed investigation. But also, there is also the bit about reporting and how people that suffer from some of these actions are able to themselves report. And we've seen how increasingly there is a huge underreporting when it comes to conflict-related sexual violence, and how member states across the African continent are very hesitant to be able to prosecute. So countries do not want to watch their dirty linens in public. They want to shield officers. They want to protect the country's image and will not want to deal with it in a very forceful manner. I think for me, those are where the challenges lie when it comes to dealing with issues of conflict and sexual-based violence. But for me, in my country, and for the little I've seen, I have seen a little bit of progress in terms of how there's official responsibility towards dealing with some of these atrocities, and institutional mechanism has been quite biting in recent times. We saw how a whole force commander was repatriated back home from Central African Republic for superintending over conflict-related sexual violence in the mission environment. And for me, that is where you have punitive measures being put in place to deal with these measures. But there is still room for improvement. In fact, there is a lot of room for improvement. And for me, countries should be able to say, yes, our officers have committed these atrocities. We will be prepared to put them through the legal process. And then if they are found culpable, they'll be punished. I feel sometimes the rhetoric on that side is different from what the reality is when it comes to the response.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Eduafo. Ms. Mapi, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Thank you very much. And
your experience?
So far, because like I've said, we haven't been involved in peacekeeping support operations or peacekeeping in general for a very, very many number of years. We've been, absent from that space. And we recently, as recent as, is it last year or is it, just started in Mozambique. I think we're a year and a half into Mozambique. And so far, I'm happy to note that we have not had any reports of sexual violence or any of that nature perpetrated by our own people who are deployed there. So it would be interesting to see as the mission continues, because now that it's been de-escalated to more of from peace intervention to peacekeeping, we are going to see many more components from the police and prison and other civilian efforts, lines of support being put in place to being deployed. So it would be interesting to see if the same continues. But in terms of any transgressions of that nature, we have not had any so far.
Okay, thank you. And I've got another question in the box here.
But it is important to note that the legal framework does exist.
I was going to say, the question in the box I've got here for you is, it says, this is from Mira Karoma, and she's asking, is there a sexual exploitation, abuse and harassment policy in your institution? Because she's saying that policies are really important in giving direction to personnel on what to do when things happen. So do you have a policy?
I'm sad to say that we don't.
You don't, okay.
I'm very sad to say that we don't, but in terms of the legal provisions, those do exist in our laws. You see what I mean? But in terms of, from an institutional point of view, where it's a policy that is known by all and, implement, we don't have it at policy level. but we do have the legal, you know, if you're speaking
Framework.
strictly, yes,
Yeah,
that
the law.
exists.
So people know the
Sexual
law exists.
harassment and all of that, we have legal provisions. It's explicitly provided for, or you know, as an explicit offense in our Botswana Defence Force Act. It is there.
Yeah, so
And,
people know there's a consequence if there's transgression.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm now going to come to, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Amondi Conchella.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Omondi Conchella.
You're very welcome.
You pronounce.
Please go ahead with your question.
My question is to Dr. Fifi and the lady Miss Mappy, and it's focused on the African Union specifically. The Office of the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security is primarily set up to strategically project the voices of women in their leadership in women, peace and security. What has been the effectiveness of this office, and what has also been the effectiveness of the various national action plans, especially in the African context, the National Action Plan on Resolution 1325. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Nairobi. Thank you.
So who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Can I ask you,
time.
Ms. Mappy, to go first this time?
Yes, I'll go first this time.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Doctor?
Yes, please.
Okay. You know, what I have observed with the UN Resolution 1325 is that as a country, we do our reports, but we have been grappling on the ground to coordinate our efforts, to implementing it, to coming up with a national action plan. That really has not taken off. Hence, in my presentation, I did speak to deliberate action and programming, because unless that is done in a deliberate way where you say that here's a national action plan and this is how it's going to be funded and here are the resources that you're going to need to implement it, we cannot advance any of the efforts that we would need to under Resolution 1325. This speaks to also the Office of the Special Envoy. Like I said, I've been sitting here for about 13, 14, 15 years now, and nothing from that end. So I don't know if it's a lack of our own action here to say, as a country, to reach out to the AU to say, as a country, we are interested in having more of your presence and more of the impact that the work of the Special Envoy is doing in our country. We want to do more. Or if it's because, you know, there is focus areas on other countries that are actually doing a lot more and will, you know, can do a lot more with the resources, with the limited resources that are probably available to the AU. So I can safely say here that it is one of the biggest regrets here that we really we're sort of just on the border of implementation. But in terms of an action plan, which is what you need to give the resolution life, you know what I mean? Without an action plan that is funded, the key thing is that we can't just come up with a document and say, no, we're just going to do 1, 2, 3 without it being actually funded. And which is why a lot of our action plans previously, you know, government put a halt on them, because it was like, you're coming up with all these things, but then you don't have the necessary funding. And then, you know, it comes as like you have not delivered. So for me, I think what a reform that would be good for us if we wanted to implement is then to start doing the work in a more meaningful way, and then saying, okay, here's our action plan, and here's our political commitment, our commitment at technocrat level on what we're going to do to implement. So, yeah.
Yes, no, you hit the nail on the head there, implementation. Dr. Fifi Aduafo, anything more you would like to add to that in terms of your experience?
Well, I think the Special Envoy's office has been doing some quite unique work, engaging with some of the different member states on helping to build the capacity of women on the continent. I know that they've had series of activities all over the continent, training women mediators, building the capacity of women mediators, helping to, and it cuts across. So they help them in terms of being conflict, being able to prevent conflict. So they teach them the right tools to be able to engage in conflict prevention, conflict analysis. So the Special Envoy's office is doing a yeoman's work, and I know that they run all of these programs all over the continent. Perhaps maybe we need to measure and see how there's been an impact and effectiveness of their actions, but I know that they're really committed towards doing a number of these, engaging in a number of these activities all over the continent. And I've seen and I've attended a couple of their meetings in the past. Referencing action plans and the role of 1325, I think there's a huge gap in terms of what 1325 itself promises, right? And then what countries themselves commit towards the implementation. And I see that sometimes there's a political rhetoric and there's the reality, right? And then also the political commitment towards implementing these indicators within the action plans. Those do not fall in line. And so we have all of our member states and all of the presidents and all of the executive presidents signing up and saying that, oh, these are very fluffy action plans, they are very beautiful, we are going to execute them within this number of months. But the reality is that there's no genuine commitment to implement them. So they are very good and nice on paper. We can use it to be able to get funding from certain donor agencies, but the commitment towards making sure that all the indicators in the action plans are implemented are missing. And we see with almost all of the action plans, at least I can speak for the West African region, some of them are in their second phase, some of them are going to their third phase, and there's no genuine commitment. So the indicators are all not met or almost not met. And then we move on to other indicators and all of those things. So for me, moving forward, we need to push our government to be committed by putting resources and committing resources towards the implementation of some of these policies. In fact, I remember I did some work about 2-3 years ago trying to evaluate the Ghana Armed Forces itself in terms of the understanding of the 1325 and then the national action plans. And I was shocked that their understanding was very limited in terms of their role. But you look at all of the 4 indicators in there and what is expected of them, and they are supposed to be playing key features in there, but the people are not even aware. So there's a lot to be done to bridge this gap with respect to the indicators within all of these various national action plans that we have, and how we want to increase the participation, we want to prevent conflict, we want to be engaged in relief and recovery, and all of those different actions that 1325 promises. I think we are paying a lot of lip service towards real commitment in dealing with the issue.
Yes, very, 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 very well put. And I'm just conscious that we've just hit the time for finishing. And I know we started a few minutes late, so if everybody's okay, I'm just going to run over a few minutes because I've got one last question in the box. And I do feel that we ought to be able to squeeze it in before we close. And this is for you, Dr. Adiwa Athol, and it's from I don't have a name for the person, but it says, I noticed that Ghana deploys women for international peacekeeping missions, but for the local missions, like the Alavanyo-Niconia conflict, if I've said that correctly, no women have been deployed. Is there a reason for this? And are there issues like this a priority for the ELSI initiative? So can I ask you if you could very, very quickly respond to that for the question?
Yes, I mean, these are questions that we ourselves have been asking the Ghana Armed Forces, why we are committed to sending a lot of women internationally, but when it comes to local deployment, we have very little deployment of women in local operations. But these are challenges that we are having to deal with moving forward. The Ghana Armed Forces themselves identify that they do not have the right structures in place to be able to deploy women in some of these local, local operations. And so the conversation is out there. I've seen certain commitments in there. At least I visited some of these local operations in the northern parts where I've seen women being deployed. So it's a gradual process. Eventually we will get there, but we are pushing them. And as we continue to push and we make a lot of noise, somebody is hearing. And so hopefully we'll have women being involved in the Konya-Alavanya conflict deployment from the Ghana Armed Forces.
Oh, okay, thank you for that. And I hope that answers your question in terms of whoever it was. And I'm sorry that I didn't have a name for you in terms of, you're raising the question, but it's an important one. The domestic agenda is equally important as the international agenda. And that applies around the world, and it certainly applies to us here in the UK. Okay, so for me, I just want to say thank you in terms of what I think has been a very rich discussion. We've covered an awful lot of ground, and we've heard some good news stories, which is great. But I think we've still got, as has been said by Dr. Eduako, we've still got an awful lot more to be done, and we've got to keep going. And somehow or other, we've got to accelerate the dial to get the momentum to get going quicker, because things tend to be a bit slow in terms of progress. So we need to find a way of accelerating and moving faster. But for me, the nail was hit on the head in terms of both of you talking about implementation. We can have all these lovely policies with all these wonderful words. We can dress them all up and make them look beautiful, and we can publish them. And they say, look, what a wonderful policy. But it counts for nothing if we don't have an implementation plan, we don't have the resources, we don't have the funding to implement. And that to me is where I want to end what I have to say, because I'm passionate about implementation. So I'm going to hand you back to Juliet, who's going to close this, and then we can all go and do whatever we need to do next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And well, it's been our great pleasure to have these wonderful speakers, and I'm really sorry that Brigadier Sitane was not able to join us. She is actually in Bangladesh at the moment on a peacekeeping conference, and all I can assume is that the internet was down or some disaster has struck from that point of view. So it's our loss, I'm afraid, and it's a great shame. But I really appreciate the knowledge and the experience of our two speakers today. It's been absolutely fabulous. And I loved some of the stories that you told about the cook, the search for the cook, and obviously it was going to be a woman. And also the lovely story about the young female pilots. It just, when you hear stories like that, I think it really does make it worthwhile to actually continue on this journey to try and get the participation of women in the security sector. I just wanted to leave with a few thoughts. Obviously, Barbara said it, and everybody else has said it, that we've still got a very long way to go on realising Security Council Resolution 1325. And implementation, yes, that's the very big one. Each country has to work at its security provision, and the national action plans are a good way to actually detail that, but it's obviously has to be a political commitment to that, and there has to be resource, which Ms. Mappy very eloquently explained. There has to be the resource and the commitment there. And I just wanted to mention that without women in policing and the armed forces, women will be missing in peacekeeping. Okay, we have civilian peacekeepers, but really we need women to be there in peacekeeping as well as military peacekeeping. So thank you to our panel. It's been absolutely fabulous. And thank you to all of you for attending. If there are any questions that you would like to, if you think of after this event, then please do get in touch with us. We'll be happy to pass them on to our speakers. The event will be, the recording of the event will be on the Security Women website. And it just leaves me to say, thank you all very much indeed for coming. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.